Hey, welcome back to another episode of Heroes and Videos. This is part two of our trip to Baltimore Comic-Con. In the last episode, you got to see some of the floor, the show, picking through comic boxes, all the great, wonderful, fun stuff that we do when we go to comic book shows. In this episode, we're going to look at what we picked up. After this brief message from our sponsor, I'm just kidding, there is no sponsor, just taking a moment to remind you guys to click like if you enjoy the content on the channel, or the channel, whatever channel is. Would love to have you subscribe to the channel, hit notifications so that you get notified whenever we drop new content. And with all of that, after just a brief fade here, we're going to take a look at what I picked up. Thanks again for joining. All right, well, that was a good time, as I mentioned there in one of the clips. It was a little interesting getting into the city. Went there and back same day. Usually we stick around for a day or two, but did not stay in a hotel this time, but just made the drive to and from same day, and was super hectic getting there. Baltimore Marathon was going on that day. That's only happened a couple of times. The show goes, some years it's in mid to early September, some years it's late October. We've had a couple of times where the Baltimore Marathon's been going on. If we're there and parked and staying overnight, that's fine. The fact that I paid for parking that was blocks away from where I could get to, I had the parking paid for, but could not access it because the streets were closed. Again, marathon runners, that's great, all well and good, that's fantastic. I just wish you were doing it somewhere other than Baltimore on Saturday of Baltimore Comic-Con. We got a bit turned around. Roads closed. Couldn't park. We were literally between Camden Yards, the baseball stadium, and the and M&T Stadium for the Ravens, on a little street there that runs right between them. Saw one of the parking people that was the crowd control folks that were telling everybody they had to turn around, and just asked the guy, "Hey man, I'm just looking for a place to park." And I mean, we could see the convention center. It's 2 blocks away, maybe block and a half, 2 blocks, and block and a half, and the guy's like, "Well, why don't you park in lot A right there?" And it's the lot for the baseball stadium, and I'm like, "Well, can we?" He said, "Yeah, you got to pay, but you can park." It was $10 for the day, so I will be looking for lot A every time I go to the Baltimore Comic-Con, particularly if we're not staying the night. Sorry, that didn't mean to go off on a marathon rant there, pun intended. But let's get right to it. Here's the program for the show I mentioned earlier. It's 26th year, so that's just awesome that they do just a great job of putting on that show every year. The books I picked up, I got this Action Comics, Action number 428. This is, if you've watched previous episodes, this is part of that run where they have these great Norman Rockwell-esque covers. And I really should look into who actually is doing the art on these things. But it's just that cool street level look where, and also, you see the sign, you see the poster, The Amazing Superman. That's interesting because I was just thinking about The Amazing Spider-Man. But The Amazing Superman there, and the kids, playing, with the baseball and bat and the glove and the dog there on the street, going, "Gee, I wonder whatever happened to him." This is not at all related to the story in the book. A lot of these covers are not, but I just love that, that piece of Americana, that street level, what the common kid would think, if you will, because we were all common kids reading these things back then. Just love it. Just love that whole series of covers, and that's just one more in the collection. Speaking of DC and stuff that you love as a kid, I have a great memory of picking up this book on the spinner rack when I was a kid. In fact, and that cave that the Titans are speeding into on the raft there, it just gave me nightmares. I remember just as a kid, that was just such a spooky thing. Loved the trade dress with the Titans at the top or the Teen Titans logo, and then the 4 of our Titans on the side there. I think that might be Lilith and Mal on the raft with them, but our 4 headliners are over here on the side: Robin, Kid Flash, Wonder Girl, and Speedy. I believe this book, because I know I had it, I believe this book was in that small stack of comic books that I purchased between first grade and third grade that my my dear mom threw out. It was, I was keeping them. To this day, I remember I had a stack of comics about, let's say, yay high, and it was in it just flat. They were stacked on top of each other inside of a brown paper grocery bag, because they fit. And the only ones I can recall, if this original book was in there, as I think it was, the only other ones I remember being in that stack were Amazing Spider-Man 100 and Amazing Spider-Man 121. Now, if you've watched previous videos, I've since repurchased those years later, many years ago. So they weren't what they how much they cost now. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that Teen Titans was in there too, and just love those covers from this whole run. It just the Titans covers from the late teens. Isn't that curious? The late teens, Teen Titans, into the 40s here of that first run are just phenomenal covers. They're amazing. There's some great Nick Cardy covers in there. I'm not sure if he did that one or not. Filling in some holes in my Captain America collection. Have most of the Steve Englehart stuff. I don't have around 160 to 164, 165, somewhere in there. So I did find these, 161, which is the a bit of a 50-plus-year-old spoiler here. The secret identity of the lady at the forefront there is Peggy Carter. It's the first time apparently Peggy Carter, I think, had shown up, maybe ever. Certainly since I don't know if she was actually around in World War II in the actual Golden Age comics, but certainly. And you'll notice Falcon still is wingless there on this cover and up in the corner. So that's Captain America 161 there with Dr. Faustus, and then 162, which I always loved this cover. Again, I believe this is still the, Cap goes mad, so we're still part of that Dr. Faustus storyline there, I think. It's just a really cool, is this Sal? I don't know who did that cover, and honestly, I can't really tell. Let me know in the comments if you know who that is, because I'm not seeing, doesn't look like Ramita. I don't know. It's hard to say, but I just love the fact that we've got Bucky, we've got MODOK, we've got Red Skull, Zemo. I have no idea who that is at the bottom there. I don't know. Maybe, what is it, a no prize you might get if you can tell me, if you can put in the comments who the villain is at the very bottom there. I know MODOK, Red Skull, Zemo, and Bucky. Not sure what that thing is. This is way before Arnim Zola, so it can't be one of those creatures that he's got going on there. Anyway, next up is a couple of issues I found near the end. Some Thors. This is I've always loved this cover. Thor 131. They strike from space. As I was reading some of this story, I really don't like all the heat that I hear people give Vince Colletta in terms of the inking and kind of lack thereof. But then sometimes when I read some books, it's like, I want to appreciate anybody that can do, I don't want to say anything, but any artistic endeavor, whether it's music, film, comics, art, painting, writing, you name it. It takes a lot of skill to be able to be creative. So I don't ever like to diss somebody. I've come to appreciate Frank Robbins, Gene Colan, George Tuska. Those were all folks that I was not a huge fan of. Kirby, I wasn't a huge fan of when I was a kid. But I've come to appreciate the time and effort and energy that people put into their art, whatever the medium is. So don't want to give Vince Colletta a hard time. But sometimes I do notice lack of detail. Is that the right word I'm looking for? That being said, he's inking Jack Kirby, so it's it's good stuff. So love that classic Thor cover. You may see a couple of these things pop up on a Thor Thursday here at some point, or Mighty Thor Thursday, if there's enough demand, which basically means if we end up getting more views. So I guess you'll vote with your clicks, right? We may never see Mighty Thor Thursday again, but moving forward. Thor 189. This is one I had years ago as well. I didn't pick this up off the stands. This is one of those books that I got in the mid 70s, mid to late 70s, when comic shops were starting to crop up. We had one in town, and it was, the kind of thing that if you were buying books from comic shops in the mid to late 70s, it's still a huge thing as a kid to buy a book that was, 10 years old maybe. And this is one I picked up at the time fairly cheap. It was probably just a few dollars, honestly. I love the story. I've always thought this was a great cover. The icy touch of death. There's just a cool panel in this thing later. Actually, I'll save that for Mighty Thor Thursday, where Hela is aging folks, and it was just kind of neat. This is that era of Thor where John Buscema was doing it, and I don't want to say they're replaying the hits. It's not that, but some of these characters like Hela, you've got a chance to see them portrayed by a lot of the Asgardian stuff. You get to see John Buscema portray it, and it's just a different vibe than Kirby stuff, than Kirby space stuff. It's really much more of the barbarian Conan kind of stuff. But Hela's one of those characters that, for me, seeing the John Buscema version is the definitive version. So that cover's always stuck with me. Maybe some of it has to do with the fact you've got first responders down here, which is pretty neat. Stan, I don't believe Stan was still doing the book at this point, but Stan and Jack and a lot of old Marvel, some of that secret sauce was the fact they showed the average Joe. They showed the people on the street. So that red fire truck was always something that drew me to it as well, with those firemen and the first responders at the bottom being unfortunately aged by Hela and in peril. Speaking of Thor, the Avengers is another book I picked up a few issues of. Have some holes in my Avengers collection as well. I did finally manage to finish the 50 to 100 run, most of which I'd had for years, but was slowly filling that in. Now I'm trying to fill in some gaps from 100 to around 115. I'm missing a few issues here and there, and then periodically after that. But this 102 is pretty neat. It is Rich Buckler doing the art, Joe Sinnott on the inks, and who doesn't love a floating head Avengers cover? The Avengers might have been the biggest, what's the word I'm looking for? Perpetrator of the floating head covers. And this one was kind of cool because it's the first time really since Avengers 9, I think, that they brought back Wonder Man, or at least the idea of Wonder Man. Vision, they mentioned when Vision came around, or when Vision showed up in 57 and 58. I think somewhere in those issues, they talked about Simon Williams' brain patterns being used for Vision, but they didn't really bring Wonder Man into that other than like the flashback thing. So here's where his Wonder Man's brother, the Grim Reaper, shows up and is of course tempting the Vision with having a human body, which is super ironic when you think about the fact that Wonder Man at this point hadn't, but once Wonder Man returned, he was more ionic, right? That ionic energy or whatever. It wasn't the idea of Vision swapping into Wonder Man's body so he'd be human doesn't really age well when you look at the stuff they did afterwards, because Simon hasn't really been human. He's more like a creation of energy or whatnot. So another Avengers. I've had this book as well, but found Avengers 161. George Perez, I believe Shooter's writing the book at this point. I do want to show you some of this one because there's some really cool color stuff going on in this book. I reread it after getting it, or repurchasing it here. And of course it's that classic Perez cover there, with the ants, and this is the infamous 8-legged ant cover. So if you look closely, and I don't think the camera's going to take it if I try to get it close enough, you can look at this on Marvel Unlimited or something, or maybe I'll try to put a scan in the maybe we can get close enough to Vision there. See that on Vision? Those ants, see on the yellow collar? Every one of these ants has 8 legs. And I know whether you're a student of insects and arachnids and whatnot, or just a fan of the Amazing Spider-Man, all of us, from a very young age, knew that ants have 8 legs. Excuse me, spiders have 8 legs, but ants do not. So that's kind of become a pretty famous cover, that every one of these ants, and that's a lot of ants on this cover that George drew. I'm assuming it's George and not whoever inked it. Pablo Marcos, I don't know. Pablo, have you been the offendant or defendant all these years, the perpetrator of the 8-legged ants? It might have been an inking job. I don't know, man. Sorry to throw you under the bus, but yeah, every one of those ants has 8 legs, which is just hilarious. But that's not what I want to show you. One of the things that I've always been struck by on this book is the coloring. Even when I first got it years ago off the stands, it's just kind of neat. See how it's shaded? I know this isn't the brightest copy, but see how it's shaded? You see the Ant-Man in the foreground, that shadow there, that they're all the ants, and Hank Pym are in shadow, whereas the Avengers are more colorful. That's a cool shot. There's also a really cool coloring of, where are we, over here? See that 4th panel down next to the last panel on this page, where everybody's kind of grayed out? That's what they're looking at Hank. They're looking at Ant-Man through this microscope, and see. So that's what, looking from Hank's side of it, they're all kind of blued out. I mean, it's just kind of cool. There are a number of things in here where the coloring is just really striking. See if I can find another example, but it was something even from, I remember when I first read the book, going, wow, that is cool. Even the, sorry, spoilers, you probably figured out if I'm actually looking through the book showing you guys stuff that you're going to see what's happening in the book. Where's another one? There were a few instances of that where it's just, the coloring is just phenomenal. There is the famous picture of Scarlet Witch. That makes a lot of, that pin up there basically shows up a lot of stuff. Over here with the big Ultron explosion. The colors are just really cool in this book. I love the way they shade it, like in those earlier pages. And then even at the panel at the very end of the book, where it's not quite the end of the Korvac saga with everybody laid out, but it's similar to that. Maybe this gave Shooter the idea, or Perez the idea. Though I guess he didn't draw the end of that Korvac one. But those scenes at the beginning, particularly, that the way that the shading works and the shadow, I thought, well, that's just really cool. And this time around, I'm like, wait, who did the coloring on this book? And guess who did the coloring on this book? Jim Shooter. So Shooter was writing it, but he's also the colorist on the book. So I just thought that was neat. I know Jim Shooter gets a lot of heat for a lot of stuff, but he really was pretty amazing, amazing dude. And the fact that he did the coloring on that book, and the coloring jumped out at me such. I thought that was pretty cool. So you can leave your Jim Shooter stories in the comments if you want. He's always been great at every show, or he was great at every show, I should say, that I ever saw him in. Rest in peace. But and he came to a local comic shop years and years ago when my kids were little, and they remember meeting him. I mean, they weren't that little, but he was just super nice, and would answer any question the kids had. And this wasn't a huge shop or a huge show. I don't think there were 10 or 15 of us standing around talking to him, and that included me and the 3 kids, or at least while we were there. Excuse me, my 2 kids. I guess I'm the 3rd kid. And now that I think about it, meeting Jim Shooter. But he was just really courteous, really nice. Doesn't matter what question any kid asked him, he was super cool about it. I just thought, my experience with the guy was always great. So now we're down to the last 3 books. And these are some of the ones I talked about at the top of the show. This one covered a hole in my collection. Not a hole, but bear with me. I meant to do this before the show. In terms of Incredible Hulk runs, that was my big clue for the fact that it was an incredible run. Incredible Hulk 154. So I started buying this book with issue 170. And it was a really wild, you always remember your first one off the stands, I think. And Hulk 170 was like a Monster Island kind of story. It was nothing too incredibly, at the time I loved it because it started in the middle of the storyline. Like I picked it up for the first time, and Bruce Banner and Betty Ross are falling 2 miles, 3 miles above the earth, and literally dropping. And I found out later what the rest of the storyline was, but it was at a time as a kid, it was like, holy cow, what's going on here? So I started picking up with 170 up, and that was one of the books that I did not miss an issue. I have all 170 up. Yes, it includes the 181 that I bought off the racks years ago. Consistently, one of the first books I read and collected consistently, that and Amazing Spider-Man. And so slowly over those years, like the same time I was just talking about with the Thors, where you could go to comic shops and buy older issues, I slowly started trying to work on my run, my pre-170 run from the Hulk. And so I had most of 150 to 170 over the years. I've slowly started to go back before that. But here we go. Sorry for having to look. This book, just this one book, completed. I now have 131 through 218. So it was one of those that, how when you have that one book that's like right in the middle of your run, and or not in the middle of your run, but it would certainly help. So before this, I had 131 to 153, decent little run, and then 155 to 218. This fills it in from now 131 to 218. I don't have too many more to fill in to get to be back to like 115 to 300 maybe, something like that. So but this one was kind of cool. I found a couple of them out in the wild, but this one was in great shape at a great price. So, and it's a great concept, as you can see. Speaking of which, sorry about the audio, Ant-Man is on the cover of this one too. So I guess it's Ant-Man week. I don't have an Ant-Man pop. I was always trying to do the pop thing to jive with what's coming up, but I don't have an Ant-Man pop. Or maybe I do. Maybe it's just back here and it's really small. So that's it. That's Hank up here wearing a Batman costume. That's my Ant-Man. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, sure. So the as you can see, the conceit of this issue though is the Hulk gets shrunk down to like Ant-Man's size, which is just a fascinating concept. You see, love Herb Trimpe's art. See the matchbook over here, the rats there. Let's say mice. No, they say they're plague rats. So I guess they're in New York City. Sorry, Big Apple. So that's Hulk 154. 2 more left. I mentioned I usually try to put hints and things over here behind me. I don't have an Iron Man pop. I was talking about this book to my son at the show, and this is a crazy thing. I mean, I know it's not that crazy. It's a comic book show. But we were talking about how, Tales of Suspense and Tales to Astonish, and how those two books split off, and Captain America and the Hulk ended up keeping the numbering. Iron Man and Submariner ended up starting their own books, and then I was telling him about this one book where they were just they had an extra story with Iron Man and Submariner, because their titles, I don't remember the exact details. You guys can help me in the comments, but they had the extra halves of Tales to Astonish and Tales of Suspense, so they did a one-shot. They did Iron Man and Submariner #1, and it was just so funny because everywhere we see this book, it's exorbitantly expensive, and while I've always wanted the book and liked the book, I didn't really want to spend that much money on the book, and I found this one for I want to say it was $20. And it's got a little, there's some stuff in the corner here that's not great. It presents pretty well. There's nothing wrong with it. There's a couple of, it looks like some spine ticks up there in the purple corner box, but it presents well. It's a good looking book, and it's $20. So, I asked the guy about it, and he said he didn't want to take it home. And so, I like it. And reading the book, it's kind of cool. I mentioned Gene Colan earlier in the show. Gene is known for doing both of these characters over time, off and on. He's doing the art in both of these stories too, so it's also kind of a cool thing there. So Iron Man and Submariner #1, finally in the collection. The last one is Amazing Spider-Man, and my favorite character, my favorite run. I have most of this run. I don't have the early stuff. Not a huge Ditko fan, though. Like a lot of those artists I mentioned earlier, I've come to appreciate his art. Though it wasn't for me at the time. This book made a list. One of my first videos on the channel was my top 10 Amazing Spider-Man covers in my collection. My collection covers a lot, and this is one of the few that I don't own. I actually, now that I think about it, let me do some quick math. There's only 45 issues of Amazing Spider-Man that I do not own. Unfortunately, most of them are under the number 45. But this is one of the covers that in that group, the Ditko stuff, the pre-Ramita stuff. This is one of the covers that would have made my list. So I may need to redo my list. So I will not keep you in suspense any longer. The book I found there was Amazing Spider-Man 24. Spider-Man Goes Mad. And I love how they do these mystery villains. And one of those favorite covers of mine is 151, where the blurb reads, "Hey, it's the Spider-Man with the water main rushing down on him and stuff," and it says, "You will never guess the shocking identity of this issue's supervillain, this issue's supervillain." And of course, it's the Shocker. So I just love the way they give it away they kind of give it away in the blurb. And down here's no different. You'll see it says, "A startling mystery tale in the mighty Marvel manner." And though I don't see him as appearing in the book, I will tell you that the psychologist, the villain in this issue is Quentin Beck, which most of you should know, or many of you would know as Mysterio. I don't think he's Mysterio in this book. This is not Mysterio's first appearance, but Quentin Beck is Mysterio. So I honestly, I haven't reread this. I haven't read this since I bought it. I'm sure I read it in a reprint or a Marvel Unlimited or something at some point. But I just love this cover because of the perspective. I've talked about this in the past in videos, that the perspective of covers can be so cool. So I'm going to walk you through this for a minute. Hopefully nobody gets vertigo. Well, I mean, you see Ditko there with the way he's got Spider-Man just in anguish there. The Vulture, Sandman, who are there, but are they there? Because they seem kind of transparent. And then this dude on the desk in the background. So bear with me. I'm going to try a little something here. See if we don't get dizzy doing this. So, that is going to... How am I doing that? There we go. So this, sorry for the glare, this is the actual perspective. Have I got that right? No, I keep going the wrong way. So really, this dude, this guy's on the floor, and Spider-Man's on the ceiling. So there you go. That's how this thing would look in reality, or that's the perspective we're actually dealing with here, which is kind of cool, because he's literally on the roof of the doctor's office, which is pretty neat. Now, obviously, that to me doesn't make as cool of a cover, and that's probably why Ditko did it like this. But I just love this. I have to redo that video because now this is definitely in my top 10 Amazing Spider-Man covers that I own. I look forward to reading the book again, yeah, I just thought that was really, really cool book. I don't. If 2 issues make a run, now I have a 23-24 run. If like 2 points make a line, I don't think that really counts for a run. But couple of great early books in that Amazing Spider-Man collection. I now need to work on finishing out the Ramita piece of that. I don't know that I'm ever going to see 1 through 22. I had a chance at a Spider-Man 14 way back in the day, 30 plus years ago. One of the few regrets I have in my life, very few, but that's one of them, is I didn't buy that Amazing Spider-Man 14 when it was when it was offered to me, 91, 92, somewhere in there. Anyway, so let me know if you went to the show. Let me know what you think of what I picked up. Let me know what you're after. What's the next show you're going to? There's another Virginia Comic Con coming up in November, I think. But for the time being, I hope you. Yeah, I'm at a loss for words. I'm gonna probably have to redo this whole video. What I really need to do is learn how to edit. So thanks for watching. Thanks for spending your time here at Heroes and Videos. In the meantime, keep watching movies, keep reading comics, and be kind to each other.